Within the north of Eric lies the Forest of Morbrook, beyond which a sword has been thrust into the earth extending down into the deep rock, and it appears impossibly large. This blade is simply known as the sword that was promised. And though very few remember who it was promised to, they only know that the earth seems to hum where it stands, that the birds never land on it, and from time to time, if you stand close enough to it, you can feel something in your chest. This is the story of King Dravik, how he broke the world, and why darkness returns to the land of Eric. The giants lived in the north of Akeroth, before Eric became what it was today, before the mortals touched the 6 aspects of magic, and before the primordials left this land. Unlike the other people of Akeroth, the giants made a different choice about their relationship with the magical forces. Rather than attaching themselves to one of the 6 aspects, they developed a relationship with the primordials, the raw forces of Akeroth that existed well before the gods, before the world tree, and before even the mortal races of Akeroth understood anything. This was not a popular choice. Seafor, the god of the sun, victory and justice, was opposed to the entire idea of primordials, stating that they were evil and he was the one who drove them back. As a result, this was the first lie, and many people of Akeroth agreed, simply taking on what the gods had told them, but this was with the exception of the dwarves, who lived among the giants for generations and therefore trusted them. But the giants lived for themselves. They didn't care what the other people thought. They discovered a relationship that was all to themselves. The giants referred to the experiences and the knowledge that they had as melodies, sacred songs, incantations, and ceremonies that could change the reality themselves. Although similar in scope, the melodies were not magic. A giant who sang a melody would allow mountains to rise up, rivers to change their course, forests to sprout overnight, roots to dig through stone themselves, and all of this only left to them. The giants were once a many and powerful people, but the war of sky and earth reduced their numbers greatly. When they fought against the dragons, a small group of giants survived and chose to go into exile. They pulled back from the affairs of Akeroth, established themselves within the mountains, living quietly, simply asking that the people who would visit come with 3 things: a pure heart, a gift for the giants, and a loan. It was during this long period, however, that the primordials saw their dwindling numbers, and it is said that Valathar, the Light Mother, provided them with a simple gift, the gift of sight. The ability to see the roots of the future, not clearly, but enough that they would know where the storms would shift, which alliances would break, and who would seek them out. And it was with this that they saw Dravik before he saw them. King Dravik was born into the upper nobility of Eric. He was raised in the customs of his family and shown himself to be in every possible respect a fine king. Not just an able one, but a good person. He waged wars for people, not for territory. His reign was very much known as a peaceful time for Akeroth, achieving something no ruler had ever been able to. He united the 11 regions, every race, every kingdom, and every single alliance under a single crown. Dravik was the true king of Akeroth, and because of him, Akeroth was a better world. With time of peace now able to be seen among the lands, he fell in love. The name of his wife was not known to present day, only that she was his beloved. A lingering and merciless disease took her away, and Dravik, using all the resources he had throughout the entire world, only sought to find that could save her. Through his knowledge, through his learnings, he found the giants. Taking an army with him, he demanded that they help, but the giants refused. Not out of malice, but out of tradition. They simply requested 3 things: for him to come alone, with no malice in their hearts, and with a gift, but he did nothing. They told him that the melodies could not be used for the purposes or ambitions of a mortal king, that compelling others to do the bidding of him was not the right path, and that some pain must be felt. Dravik did not see this as wisdom. He saw this as people watching his beloved die and doing nothing. But she was doomed to die, and so, with this, something in him broke. The fear he had turned into hatred, and the hatred he had turned into anger, and this anger sparked a war. A single conviction that formed in his mind: the giants would pay, all of them. But the war against the giants was not something everyone could abide by. His own court rebelled against him, his generals threw him aside, the noble families of Eric, the ones that he had been tied to for blood oaths and even love, deserted him. They called him mad, they called him the sorrowful king, and when the words failed to stop him, they stripped him of his crown and usurped him. Dravik was deposed by his own people. The man who had united 11 regions and created the very kingdom of Akeroth was now nothing. The throne was handed over to a council of lords who believed in making peace with the giants, but none of them could ever predict what Dravik would do. Now crownless, he walked through the wilderness of the north, beginning to prepare for his war. In his years of searching for a solution for his beloved, he found many things, including something the giants did not want him to find: melodies. There wasn't many, but he found one that would allow him to speak directly to the gods. He only had one goal: speak to Seafor and ask him to aid him where he needed. Seafor saw the desperate attempts of the king as a chance for himself to have his higher aspirations achieved. He did not want the giants alive. So he thought helping this king would allow him to have everyone in Akeroth praise him. And so he agreed. He gave him an army. He began to craft the Adaphane, who would then descend upon the land and show that Dravik was not alone in this war. But alongside that, he gave him the blade that he would use to kill an entire race. And all of this culminated in the greatest destruction that Eric had ever witnessed. The event would come to be known as many things: the Reckoning, the First Genocide, Dravik's War, but those that experienced it always wrote it as a single word: tragedy. Mayfalls was Dravik's first target. He entered there and his campaign was merciless. With the stolen power he took from the giants, he achieved a power that no mortal army had ever seen. But the giants were prepared. For years prior to the war, the gift of seeing had warned them that this was coming, and therefore they had constructed an answer to this power: the 4 sacred wardens. Built using melodies, using the knowledge of the dwarves, and the connection that they had to the world tree, they made each warden a fundamental aspect of Akeroth: the warden of the body, the warden of the mind, the warden of the soul, and the warden of the world. They knew that they could shatter Dravik's forces and ensure that they had a defensive line that would protect them from Dravik's wrath. But Dravik wasn't alone. He had Seafor, and Seafor demonstrated to him the existence of Voidcraft. The Void was the space before creation. Dravik, using melodies, tapping into Voidcraft, crafted a power never meant for mortal hands. Dravik grew in size, surrounded by dark energy, wielding a sword that was said to be forged by the gods, and the sword struck the giants, unmaking each of them. One by one, the giants succumbed to his campaign, something that they did not see coming. They knew the war was coming, they knew they had to prepare, but they didn't know how much power his hatred would have. And the final battle took place in the northmost point of Eric, the last remnants of the giants standing in defiance as the 4 wardens converged to protect them. The confrontation was brutal. The earth was cracked, the sky ran with purple, and the melodies clashed with such ferocity that slaughtered soldiers lie on both sides. Dravik swung his sword with all the hate he had accumulated since the death of the woman he loved, and the giants perished. An entire race that sculpted mountains, could see the future, and composed songs that were far older than anything the earth had seen, were gone in a single moment. But the wardens, they did not perish. They knew what they had to do. Their goal was simple: kill King Dravik. But he was already dying. His body was being unmade by the very voidcraft he had consumed, the melodies that were not meant for mortal hands. And so, with every shred that he had, he drove the blade into the ground. The king, who had united a continent, who had destroyed an entire race, died on that same ridge alone. The wardens ended his life, and there was no account for what happened, but all that is known is that Dravik fell. With Dravik now dead, the melodies began to silence themselves, and the wardens had nothing else to do. They were simply creations with no masters, and so, with nothing to keep them going, the light diminished, the stone returned to the ground, They spread themselves across Eric, and moss began to grow over them. They became part of the terrain, distorted by stories, growing more unreliable with each retelling. And the war had ended, peace was finally in Eric, and the throne was handed over to the Leonars. Centuries had now passed since the tragedy, and Eric thrives in the era of heroes. Celebrations in Sandrise, children in Homefire flying kites, and bards in New Eric singing the old ballads so skillfully that even old men cry into their ale. This was a time of peace, but that was slowly changing. The ground shuddered, and something began to return. Throughout Eric, beneath the mountains and the very earth, the sacred wardens woke up. Whatever ancient task the giants had embedded within them began to move again. The wardens felt what Eric could not. They knew something was happening, and that could only mean one thing. He was coming back. At this point, the people of Eric had no concept of what was descending upon them, no awareness that their peaceful existence was about to be destroyed. The wardens were not autonomous. They were simply instruments. They were tools constructed by the giants with one singular goal. They did not discriminate or even exhibit restraint. They traversed the land, shadowing over everything, destroying anything in their path. But they were only half the issue. They were walking towards the sword that was summoning its master. It was now that people began to piece it together. The threat of a king who loved someone so deeply that when she died, he vowed the world would pay for it. A king who was thrown aside by his own kingdom, by his own throne, returning for a single promise. He was the king of Eric, and he wants it back. So a single question remains: will you take up the blade and become a legend of Akeroth?